I went there to Russia at the end of the Soviet Union when Russia became a capitalist country. I set up an investment fund to invest in Russia. I discovered in the companies that I was investing in that the oligarchs and other corrupt officials were stealing money from those companies. I kind of, I guess, naively thought that I could stop the stealing by publicly exposing it. So I launched these naming and shaming campaigns against Russian oligarchs. And as you can imagine, I didn't make myself too popular. And after living there for 10 years, I was expelled from the country in 2005. I was declared a threat to national security. And then my real problems began. My office in Moscow was raided by the police. The office of my law firm was raided by the police. And they seized a bunch of documents, and those documents were then used to create a very complex fraud in which the Russian officials, corrupt officials, and organized criminals stole $230 million of taxes that I had paid to the Russian government from the Russian government. I had a young lawyer named Sergei Magnitsky who investigated this and discovered who was involved, how they were involved. He publicly denounced them. He made a formal witness statement against them. And then the people who he testified against subsequently arrested him, put him in pretrial detention, where he was then tortured for 358 days until he was murdered on November 16, 2009. And since his murder, I've made it my life's work to go after the people that killed him to make sure they face justice. And for the last 12 years, that's what I've been doing. And this has culminated in a piece of legislation named after Sergei Magnitsky called the Magnitsky Act, which freezes the assets and bans the visas of the people who killed him and the people who commit similar types of human rights abuses in Russia and around the world. Vladimir Putin hates the Magnitsky Act more than anything. It's been broadened. It's now the global Magnitsky Act. It doesn't just apply to Russia, it applies to all bad actors all over the world. Putin is so angry with the Magnitsky Act. Why is he so angry? Because he has a lot of money. He's a very rich man. He's probably worth north of $200 billion. And that money is held through oligarch trustees, and they hold that money in the West. And so he's come after me in every possible way. I've been threatened with death, with kidnapping, with arrest warrants. They've issued 8 Interpol arrest warrants for my arrest. They've sentenced me to 18 years in Russian prison in absentia. They've accused me of murder. They've accused me of espionage. They make movies about me, sue me, do everything about me. At the Trump summit, the Putin-Trump summit in Helsinki in 2008, Putin was saying he would hand over the 12 military intelligence officers who were accused by the Department of Justice of hacking the U.S. election if Donald Trump handed me over. And Donald Trump's response was, "That's an incredible offer." It took Trump 4 days to walk it back. And I just pictured a bunch of SUVs from the Department of Homeland Security, encircling where I was staying, grabbing me and putting me on some rendition flight back to Russia. I was terrified.
How would you describe Vladimir Putin today compared to the man that you became familiar with during your time in Russia?
What we've seen is that Putin has gotten richer, he's gotten more powerful, but he's also gotten more scared because he understands that at some point the Russian people can say enough is enough. Why we're supposed to be a democracy. Why are we allowing you to just ruin our lives like this? And so he needed to do something quite radical to change the narrative. And he did what every dictator does when they're worried about being overthrown by their people. He started a war. And if you were to look at the opinion polls in Russia, the approval ratings of Vladimir Putin, you can see a very worthy invasion of Georgia in 2008. His approval ratings were flagging. He invaded, they go up dramatically. Before 2014, when he took Crimea, his approval ratings were flagging. He invaded, they went up dramatically. And now, recently, they were flagging until he declared war on Ukraine, and they went up dramatically. It's an absolute, clear, easy to see pattern. And that is what it's all about. He is not a nationalist. He's not trying to recreate the Soviet Union. He cares nothing about legacy. He just cares about his own personal survival. There's the idea that NATO encirclement caused him to invade Ukraine is nonsense. So is the idea that he wants to rebuild the legacy of the former Soviet Union. I don't think he cares about the legacy of anything. If he did, he wouldn't have been stealing everything from the people for so long. I think this is purely and only a desperate play to stay in power. And that actually informs us about how to respond to him, because if I'm correct, and I'm very confident that I am, then this whole idea of giving him an off-ramp, negotiating with him, all of that doesn't mean anything. The only thing that will cause him to stop this war is if he's defeated. That's the only thing. And so if that is the case, and I believe that to be the case, then the only option for us is to do everything we can possibly do to help the Ukrainians win this war. And that's including more arms, a no-fly zone, financial support, crippling sanctions. Because if we don't do that to the maximum extent possible, and for whatever reason Putin is able to win this war, his next stop is going to be Estonia, Lithuania, Poland, and he's going to be pointing his guns at those countries. He's going to be seeing whether this thing called Article 5 of NATO, this collective defense treaty that we all have, whether it really works, whether the US military is ready to go to war with Russia over a country that 99% of Americans couldn't locate on a map.
As you know, enforcing a no-fly zone has been a non-starter for fear this will start a third world war and Putin may unleash nuclear weapons. How likely is he to do that?
Does he really want to start a war with NATO where he'll lose in an afternoon? I don't think so. This is the kind, he only respects strength. And all of this idea of publicly saying, we're not going to go near you, we don't want to engage with you, is just encouraging him to do whatever he wants in Ukraine. We should make no mistake. Vladimir Putin will use nuclear weapons no matter what, if he sees it in his interest to do so. And it doesn't matter whether we do a no-fly zone or not. It's not like we can provoke him to do that. If he decides that he wants to come and threaten us with nuclear weapons, he will. The one thing he does understand is strength, power. That's the one thing he understands and he respects. He's a thug, he's a bully, and we have to stand up to him. We have to show him that if he wants to, if he decides to go further, we'll make life really miserable for him.
Could the sanctions have been imposed earlier?
If we had applied sanctions earlier on, before the invasion, Vladimir Putin might have done something differently, because he was banking on the fact that we were all so greedy and also narrow-minded that we wouldn't do any sanctions, because he had reason to believe that, because for the last 22 years, when he's done something terrible, there's never been any real material reaction. When he invaded Georgia, we didn't do anything. When he invaded Crimea, we put a few sanctions on, but we did it more for show than for reality. When he shot down a passenger plane with 298 innocent civilians, we did nothing. When he bombed innocent civilians in Syria and created 5 million refugees, we did nothing. When he used Novichok, a banned chemical nerve agent in Salisbury, England, we did nothing. The purpose of these sanctions now is to dry up his financial resources so he just doesn't have the money to wage this war in Ukraine. All US presidents, going back to George Bush, have empowered Putin to do this. Nobody wanted to hold him to account. George Bush looked him in the eye and saw his soul in their very first meeting. President Obama wanted to reset relations, as used to, in Donald Trump's case, he thought Putin was a good guy. And this is just the US reaction. And I could point to similar stupidity on behalf of other foreign leaders and our European allied countries. Everybody in every government has misplayed Vladimir Putin for the last 20 years. And this is the result of a 20-year basic appeasement approach towards Putin, which has empowered him to do what he's done in the last 6 weeks.
What about all the civilians who are being brutally murdered, even children?
Russian soldiers don't do anything unless they're told to do it. If they're told to go and rape and pillage and dismember and torture, they'll rape and pillage and dismember and torture. This is organized brutality that's coming from the very top from Vladimir Putin. And he's doing it for a very specific reason. He wants to be feared. He doesn't want to be liked, he wants to be feared. He wants everybody to be terrified. And the best way of terrifying people is to be a terrorist. And he is terrorizing the Ukrainians in the most awful, terrible way. This is Osama bin Laden, September 11th, every day in Ukraine.